So without further ado, I invite our panel speakers to come up and have a seat, please. Okay, so welcome, and why don't each of you take a turn in introducing yourself, tell us what your role was in this Gold Review.
I'm John Turner from the Department of Electronic Media and Film, EMF, in the Media Center. And I got started with the Gold Review process back in the fall, actually with sort of the introductory workshop for QM, and did that in November, and then did the certification program over the January break, and then participated as one of the reviewers in a Gold Review of one of the courses, on one of the online courses here at Towson. And that's what brings me to the panel this morning. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, my name is Wendy Whitener, and I'm from the College of Health Professions in a professional health studies department. Specifically, I teach healthcare management courses. And I actually became interested in the Gold Review because I teach a core course, and there was an interest in taking that particular course through the process. I began the process in terms of going through the training in the fall and redesigning the course that I already teach online to make it fit the QM processes and measurement and evaluation portions of it. And actually it went live in January.
Hello, I'm Terry Ewell from the Department of Music. I first became a part of the Gold Review with one of my online courses being one of the pilot courses reviewed. I teach 3 online core curriculum courses, and I will be developing another course in the future of this next year. So one of my courses was part of the pilot, worked very closely with Joe and others in the office, and so it was reviewed in the fall semester. I went through some training that Towson University had for the Quality Matters, and that course was reviewed then in the fall. I made some changes to the course, and then it was finally certified in the spring semester. And I also went through similar training that John did in January to become a Quality Matters peer reviewer.
I forgot to add earlier that the deans have been very supportive of the process. Originally, OAI said that we would sponsor 2 faculty from each college for the training to become a certified peer reviewer, because there is a small amount, $200 per person, because one of the trainings is actually through Quality Matters. It's not held on campus. And each dean said, well, I have more than 2 people who want to go through this. If I pay the $200, will you accept them? We said yes. So we really have a larger pool of faculty now because of the dean's support for this process. So it's okay. So let's talk about faculty development, because as I said, originally the whole online distance education enterprise was originally conceived as something that faculty would be involved in, because we are a teaching institution. So could you tell us a little bit about what your takeaway was for faculty development or adult learning, however you want to define that?
In terms of faculty development, since this is a predominantly teaching institution, I often worry about making sure that my course outcomes matches my activities, etc., in my classes, whether they're online or face-to-face. So what this process did was make me focus on those things, because that's a part of the QM process. Does the outcomes match your activities, content, etc., and then measuring those things. So it does a great job of bring that to you, bringing that face-to-face interaction or online interaction. Specifically, I remember talking to my chair the other day, sharing with him that I keep Bloom's taxonomy up on one of my screens always, because it's a reminder of what I should be doing in terms of my courses.
Well, for me, failed to mention in my introduction that I have been teaching an online class in EMF, one of our introductory courses that's taught online. So that started me out on the in the online program, of which then I became interested in. But what I found valuable about all of this was that, it's not as a reviewer, as starting out as a reviewer, a gold reviewer for another existing online course. It wasn't like just a one-way street. For me as a reviewer, it was a learning experience. It wasn't just me giving feedback to the course instructor, but it also helped me learn from that person things that they were doing well, things that they were doing in their online class that I hadn't considered. It was a learning process for me as a reviewer. I looked at it as not, just providing that person feedback, but it was also helpful to me to review that course and see, hey, this is a good idea that I could add to my class.
In addition to all of those comments, I want to add that what the Quality Matters helped me with was seeing my course through the eyes of a student and the way in which they will see the materials for the first time, the flow of the course, the introduction of the course, the way in which troubleshooting can happen through the course. All of that, I think through the Quality Matters curriculum, just help focus that and made, I think, for a tighter, more improved course. Certainly as an instructor, I wanted to do that. But thinking through the issues that somebody with a type of disability might have, or somebody, how will they see your first page and your information? How will that move then to the next page? We talk a lot about what alignment, and you spoke about that, alignment of what are the objectives, the Towson University objectives. Well, how does that work down then to what my unit objectives are? How did that meet it? And then what are the assignments given, the tools in the course? How do all of those fit together to make a cohesive and course that works together as a unit that guides the student through a learning process through the entire course? And I found that very, very helpful.
Right. Thank you. I want to add to that, to go back to what John had said about his viewing someone else's course. Now, this really pushes the envelope in terms of the way we teach, because typically we teach in our classroom by ourselves, and other faculty don't see us teach unless we're going to have a peer review for promotion, tenure review, so forth. And so to be able to go into someone else's course is really a privilege to see how other people do it. And then it's also a part of your developing your professional repertoire in learning how to give feedback that's helpful. So as you're helping faculty, you're also thinking about, oh yeah, maybe I could do this with my students too. Like this, it's better to say it this way than that way because they'll get it, rather than just, superlatives. Great, good, oh, this is terrible. You really need to give things that help a person to correct what they're doing. So I think there's a lot of good practice for teaching and learning, and also for seeing courses outside of your own domain, which you can also do face-to-face. Some teaching and learning centers actually have that. We don't have it at Towson, but this is not something brand new. It's something that we're finally beginning to apply. So, and speaking of teaching then, what was your takeaway about teaching, like when you compare the online with face-to-face? Did you have any ahas about that, like the contrast?
If I could follow up first with just the process itself and this idea of peers looking in at your course. I know that those of you who might be doing this in the future go in this very reluctantly and fearful. And I'll tell you, as having my course reviewed, I found it to be a very positive process. First off, the staff is tremendously supportive and helpful through the process. The faculty that were peer reviewers of my course gave me which I say they were not condemning comments or anything like that, or insulting or anything like that. No, they were very intuitive, very instructive, very helpful for the way I could recraft the course and rethink it. So, I just encourage you that this is a process that's going to make you a better teacher and provide your course, make it a better course for your students. So I'm sorry to introduce that.
Anything else about comparing this process with face-to-face, what some challenges might be?
Well, I'd say one thing is actually in going through this, you're actually learning how to make that online course as close as possible to teaching it in the classroom. You'll learn ways where it's just not the instructor providing information, but ways in which you can get your students to interact with you in various ways. So that's really very helpful in trying to make that online experience as similar as can be to a classroom experience. And then Terry mentioned also, as far as teaching attributes, is it really gets you thinking about what the learning objectives are for your course and how those are tied into every aspect of your teaching and course design, so that you take those course objectives from the beginning to the end and help your students succeed in being successful in learning those objectives by the end of the course.
And I guess I'll come behind you guys and maybe end it. What it does, it makes you plan out the whole course from the beginning to the end. And so once it's planned and you have all the content and materials in place, interactive pieces or whatever you want to add to it, that actually gives you time to actually sit and really interact with your students. Spend time, quality time, in terms of responding to discussion posts and actually give quality or effective feedback to them versus, and you will, Murphy's Law, something always happens. We have to troubleshoot something, that happens. But for the most part, it gives you time to actually spend with the student in terms of quality interactions, whether it's a discussion post regarding groups or you have them all dumped into one particular module where the entire course, the class interacts. So that's what I felt was as value for me, is I was able to actually have a more robust conversation with the individual students.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. I'm glad you added that, because sometimes, especially those faculty who are not involved with online learning, but they seem to think that, it's not really as good as teaching face-to-face. It's good to know then that it's worth the investment of time to prepare the course in a certain way, because then it allows you the freedom to do the one-on-one interaction or group interactions. It can be done, but it depends on the way it's designed and whether or not you've had enough lead time to actually prepare the course. It's not that you can't change things, but the overall structure is there to support faculty. So I'd like to also know, did you notice anything or did you learn something? Let me put it this way. Did you learn something new about learning in general?
There are different types of learners. So one of my major challenges is trying to figure out how to best fit their needs. So, for example, I try to do use interactive ways like media to bring in content to try to make sure the people who don't like reading, that they can get the content in some way, form or way. So I have done Panoptos, pre-recorded ones. I have done YouTubes, etc., from like the industry to try to bring in also examples of actually whatever concept I'm trying to get across, where they'll see it applied. So a lot of content regarding application of a concept is what I try to focus on to give them a full understanding of what I'm trying to convey and also meet the goals and objectives that I've set forth in that the course outcomes and actually the individual module.
The online learning environment in many ways can be superior for some students. And let me give you an example of this. A couple of years ago, I was teaching an online course in music theory. And early on, one of my students contacted me and had the Disability Services paperwork, and he was quite concerned about being able to take the online tests, the quizzes, how he would fare in the course, because I think he had struggled in other courses at Towson University. So we talked through the issues. I made available courses at twice the length and everything, according to what was the plan and things. And so I didn't really monitor specifically his progress through the entire courses we're going through, because things seem to be going well. There's other students that need help. I was absolutely shocked at the end of the course. When I totaled up the grade for this course, which I had taught for 5, 6, 7 years, he had the highest marks of any student I had ever had in the course. So not only did he succeed in the course, he was the most successful in this environment. And as I thought about it, the online course allows the student to tailor their learning environment, lighting levels, amount of sound, distraction. They can learn it. I teach asynchronous, so they can learn at the time of day that they're most receptive. They can put in extra work. And so for this student, this was a very effective medium for them to learn.
And I'd also add that, once again, the learning takes place from both the perspective of the reviewer, like myself, and the students, that what I learned from the process from being a reviewer, and also I had mentioned that earlier about just what you learn from being a reviewer, but another valuable step in this process is when the reviewers come together after each has reviewed the course and talk about what their findings were, and the learning that comes out of that for the reviewers, and collaborating together, talking about what they liked or what they saw could be improved in that course, that maybe they saw something that I didn't, and I'd learned from that. So that collaboration is great there, in sort of the middle step of when all the reviewers come together and sort of look over each other's findings and discuss that. But also, yes, definitely, it helps you. The goal here is that if you take these suggestions, you apply them to your course, that you improve your course design, that's going to be a better learning experience for your students. And that's the other, definitely, and the other valuable output of this process.
You mentioned, several of you mentioned about alignment. Because alignment is a challenge, whether you're teaching face-to-face or in the online environment, where OAI is going to offer a module on alignment, which is part of that thing that Joe referred to that's called the Online Edge Certificate Program, which is more of the faculty training or preparation. Concerning alignment and assessment, did you learn anything or discover anything about assessment in general through this process?
You can be creative with your assessment. It doesn't have to be traditional, like a quiz or something like that. It can be them demonstrating some type of skill. For example, in healthcare management, one of the things that I try to bring home to the students is the importance of communication, and I usually make them write memos. So conveying whatever concept in a memo to whoever the target audience is, I usually say to maybe the quality manager or the CEO of a hospital. So that's one way that I try to be creative besides a traditional quiz or test, to try to get them hopefully interested in what they're embarking on in their new career.
One of the big issues of alignment is to create measurable goals. And often it's amazing how unspecific we are with our language. For instance, I've seen many objectives looking at, well, learn more about this. Well, that's not particularly measurable because you could learn a little bit, you could learn a lot. How are you going to measure whether somebody has accomplished that goal? So it caused me to rethink how I make my objective statements, the way in which I get those to align to Towson University, student learning outcomes and things. But stating them in a way that then I can measure them appropriately, I think is an important part of that alignment.
And that's why Bloom's Taxonomy is my best friend.
Yes, that comes in. Yeah, I think it's a great a great value to the review process, that because all of us, before this have been involved in assessment and the emphasis on it in recent years, that if we have learning objectives for our courses, we need to show that students are reaching those goals by the end of our class. And this gold review process helps you design that class so that is more likely to happen in your class, that everything is connected there to those learning objectives to help those students succeed in reaching those goals by the end. And that's what's really valuable.
Great. So in teacher education, we would say that teaching is a craft. It's both art and technology. It's both intuition and insight and those creative things that we think about great teachers possessing, but it's also about technology and, some things must be step by step, and some things must really fit well as opposed to being more intuitive. So I think that's great about about assessment. I think that Wendy was talking about something I might call authentic assessment. It's assessment that relates to the real world application of the knowledge. So there's great room also for assessment in general, and I'm glad that you took away some positive things. So, okay, this all sounds really good, but what are some of the challenges that you see, and any suggestions for improving the process, the content?
I guess I don't have so much comments on improving with the process itself, but I do have comments on the nature of online instruction. And typically what I find as I look at other materials that are online is that professors have adopted the paradigms of face-to-face instruction and tried to fit them into online instruction. And in many ways, it's not as successful. So let me give you some examples. Typically, face-to-face instruction, you've got the instructor in front, lecturing 50 minutes, maybe some PowerPoint. We're now technologically advanced, and so instead of the chalkboard, you've got your PowerPoint. And so what do? Oh, let's stick the camera in the back of the room, let's lecture again for 50 minutes, put in some PowerPoint, and that's it. I find that to be incredibly less effective than rethinking my delivery through video. My videos online tend to be much shorter, no more than 10 minutes. I find that is much more effective with the attention span of the students, with what they want to see. And again, I do less so of the talking head approach. I put in much more graphics. In fact, I rethink how I present this. I present it in a way that could not be presented face-to-face because I may integrate video, I may integrate graphics, I may have with that, you can embed questions within that students have to answer online. There's different ways you can make your videos interactive. So there's a number of different approaches. So it's removing ourselves from the paradigm of thinking I have to duplicate what's in class in order to be effective. No, this is effective in a different way and can be effective to different students than the online or the face-to-face classes. So rethinking that paradigm is one of those issues. I have others, but I don't want to dominate here, so.
Well, I did have reservations at first, because having taught online for over 10 years, and they were like a turnkey approach, and this reminded me of it. So I was afraid of, I guess you would say, my freedom in terms of my teaching style. But you can make it your own. So going through the process showed me that. I think I was resistant in a couple of areas, and Joe brought me to the light and let me see that you can do that. You can do that. You can actually do what you want to do. So it's not prescriptive, because it gives you your own. You can put your own flavor into your classroom. So thanks for helping me with that, because it took a while for him to talk me into it.
Yes, and I'd have to agree with Terry. I guess, one of the challenges is, how do you keep your students' attention, for the online class? In the classroom, if you see that they're not paying attention, you can sort of speak a little bit louder or reemphasize something, or those types of strategies. So you have to think about, on the online course, how are you going to keep their interest and attention to learn what you want them to learn. And I would agree that's a big challenge, and from what Terry is doing, those are ways to combat that with the shorter lectures, more graphics, and so forth.
The other thing to consider is we're early in online education here. Much of what I see online, though, looks very institutional and very text-heavy in some ways. It's as if you just publish the textbook online, maybe have a picture or two, and that's it. And I think that, again, misses the effectiveness of the environment here. When I was a doctoral student at the University of Washington, I had to wait for many, many months to sign up to get to be in the Graduate Library Reading Center there. And what I loved so much about that, I could read my books anywhere. I could go anywhere on campus, but to go in there, the stained glass windows, the beautiful wood desk, I found when I was in an environment that was welcoming, quiet, which I say inspiring, I learned better there. So I would routinely, make my study times there and it would take an extra walk to get there because it was so wonderful. And that's what I aspire to in my online courses. I want them, when they come to the course, to be welcome to it, that it be interesting graphically, that those graphics support my learning, that instead of having an institutional feel that often is just, just a certain framework that looks a certain way. I've actually developed my own online website that I have the students come to, because I'm trying to create that environment that holistically encourages them to learn, that welcomes them, where they feel that they can really learn the material here. So as you're thinking of your online courses, what can you do to make it much more welcoming to the students? Particularly our student of today, look at what they're watching on YouTube. Look at the websites they're visiting. They're looking for color. They're looking for interest. They're looking for human faces and that, rather than just that blank sheet of paper with text on it.
And so we're hoping that people in the room are going to go back and share this information with their colleagues. So what advice would you give to a faculty member who might be thinking about participating, thinking about submitting their course for a Gold Review, or even going through the training to become a reviewer? What could you recommend?
It's going to take some time, so don't rush through it, because if you do, the reviewers will have some interesting comments for you to make you slow yourself down and really think through the process.
Well, this may be touching on the next point, but I found it a very good process from the team at OAI. Like I say, we started out with a fall workshop that got our feet wet as to what the QM process was and what are traditional standards for online courses, and then went through the specific training myself in January. Although it wasn't easy either. It's a rigorous process, but in the end, you look back on it and think about how helpful it all was to not only helping others, but to help yourself to be a better teacher.
Yeah, I also reiterate what Wendy says. Give yourself time, ask a lot of questions, and it really is a worthwhile process you'll develop as a teacher.
And would you like to add anything about what's your vision for the future of online learning?
Well, I think there is a future, and that's why we need to be thinking about this. And Jane, you mentioned earlier, it's not like the big goal has to be that we convert every class to online, but that we do need to offer, you know, a certain percentage of our courses for students in this busy world of today, to make it easier and more convenient for them to enter into higher education and to learn at the college level. So I think and I was glad to hear, and I can see why it is, that Towson is going to be maybe the USM model for, you know, Gold Review and online education, because of what I've experienced with this team in the last year.
With the shift of having more people who work full-time, I think this is the method of choice in terms of learning. So I've seen it over the past 10 years. It's actually morphing and actually getting bigger. So it's becoming more of a concern, especially of traditional college settings, because the proprietary schools have taken it and ran with it. And I guess we're looking at it, we need to look at this model, and we need to figure out how to best fit the needs of our growing population of full-time working adults.
And yes, the online education is really an issue about accessibility. And I think that fits in very well with Towson University's mission, that we want to reach as many students as we can with a quality education to where they are. Just a year ago, I had a young expectant mother email me online saying, I couldn't take any courses at Towson, the baby is due in such and such a date, can you please get me in your course? I said, sure. And she was able to successfully fulfill the course. So there's a happy student who was able to continue with her life and what she needed to do, and yet continue the education.
Great. Well, let's give our panel a great applause. Thank you for sharing your insights.